The night was alive with opulence. A grand chateau in the heart of Paris stood illuminated against the midnight sky, casting golden reflections onto the lavish gardens below. Inside, the air buzzed with the laughter of the elite, the world's most powerful business tycoons, politicians, and socialites gathered under the guise of charity. Though every whispered conversation carried undertones of business and hidden agendas. Among the glittering sea of gowns and tailored suits, Ethan Blackwood moved like a shadow, controlled, unreadable. The 38-year-old tech billionaire, known for building Blackwood innovations into a global empire, was as admired as he was feared. His presence was magnetic, yet distant, like a monarch surveying his kingdom from afar. The press had tried for years to unravel his mysteries, but no one had ever succeeded. No one, until tonight. Sophia Lancaster, a 32-year-old investigative journalist, stepped into the ballroom with one goal: to uncover the secrets Ethan Blackwood so meticulously guarded. She was no stranger to power plays. She had brought down corrupt CEOs, exposed political conspiracies, and never lost a battle. Yet tonight, as her sharp eyes scanned the room, she knew this would be her toughest challenge yet. She spotted him easily. Tall, impeccably dressed in a black tuxedo, exuding effortless authority. He was surrounded by men who commanded entire industries, yet he stood apart, an island of controlled solitude amid the sea of influence. Sophia didn't hesitate. Confidence was her armor. She strode toward him, her sleek emerald gown flowing like liquid silk around her. When she stopped beside him, she didn't wait for permission to speak. "Mr. Blackwood, may I have a moment of your time?" The conversation around them hushed slightly. Those within earshot exchanged intrigued glances. No one ever approached Ethan Blackwood uninvited. Slowly he turned, lifting his glass of whiskey with the same effortless grace that seemed ingrained in his every movement. His dark blue eyes flicked over her, assessing, calculating. A man who never allowed himself to be caught off guard. "I don't do interviews." His voice was deep, smooth, carrying a finality that would have sent lesser journalists retreating. But Sophia wasn't just any journalist. She tilted her head, unfazed. "Just a few questions. I'm sure the public would love to hear your thoughts on the recent tech regulations impacting Blackwood innovations." A ghost of a smirk played at the corner of his lips, amused but unimpressed. "I have nothing to say." He took a sip of his drink, then, without another word, turned and walked away. Sophia clenched her jaw, watching his retreating figure. The arrogance, the absolute audacity. If Ethan Blackwood thought she would give up that easily, he was sorely mistaken, because Sophia Lancaster never backed down before she got what she wanted. The gala continued, but for Sophia Lancaster, the night was far from over. Ethan Blackwood may have dismissed her, but she wasn't the type to walk away from a challenge. She had spent years exposing the powerful, peeling back the layers of deception they wrapped themselves in. And Ethan? He was the most carefully constructed fortress she had ever encountered. She needed a new approach. Instead of leaving, Sophia made her way to the rooftop bar of the hotel, hosting the event. It was an elegant space, dimly lit, with soft jazz humming in the background. The kind of place where powerful men whispered their secrets over expensive scotch. She settled into a secluded corner, ordering a glass of whiskey. The liquor burned down her throat, but it was the frustration she was trying to drown out. Ethan Blackwood was unlike anyone she had ever pursued. He didn't flinch, didn't even show the slightest crack in his armor. He had dismissed her as if she were nothing more than an insignificant distraction. And that pissed her off. "Didn't take you for a whiskey drinker." The smooth, deep voice came from behind her. Sophia stiffened slightly before schooling her features into indifference. She turned, her sharp green eyes meeting Ethan Blackwood's piercing blue gaze. He stood there, relaxed, yet completely in control, a glass of scotch in his hand. She arched an eyebrow. Surprised to see a busy businessman like you taking time to unwind." Ethan shrugged, pulling out the seat next to her with effortless ease. "I'm simply enjoying the part of the evening when the social masks come off." Sophia let out a low chuckle, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. "Is that so? I thought you never took yours off, Mr. Blackwood." His smirk deepened. "Maybe I'll make an exception tonight." The air between them crackled. It wasn't just a conversation, it was a battlefield. Every word, every glance was a calculated move, and neither of them was willing to yield. Sophia leaned back slightly, feigning nonchalance. "I haven't forgotten how rudely you brushed me off earlier." Ethan lifted his glass, his eyes glinting with amusement. "And yet, you still can't seem to take your eyes off me." She scoffed, but she couldn't deny the truth behind his words. There was something infuriatingly captivating about him. Their drinks emptied one after another, but instead of easing the tension, it only transformed into something far more dangerous. Neither of them remembered who made the first move, but the moment their lips met, all resistance shattered. Ethan pulled her closer, his firm hands tracing the curve of her back. Sophia didn't push him away. Instead, she wrapped her arms around his neck, sinking into the warmth of the man she had once considered her enemy. The world outside the rooftop bar faded. The only thing that remained was the heat between them. The night in Paris was still young, but for Sophia Lancaster, everything already felt off balance. She had spent the past hour locked in a battle of wits with Ethan Blackwood, the cold, elusive billionaire she was determined to expose. Yet, instead of walking away with the upper hand, she found herself drawn into something far more dangerous. The tension between them had been unrelenting, a push and pull neither seemed willing to stop. And when their lips had finally collided in a reckless, whiskey-fueled kiss, all logic had shattered. Now, as she stepped into Ethan's private car, heading toward his penthouse, she told herself this was just another part of the game. A dangerous game she wasn't sure she wanted to win. The sleek black Rolls-Royce glided through the streets of Paris, the glow of streetlights casting golden streaks across the tinted windows. Inside, the silence was thick with unspoken tension. Sophia sat with her arms crossed, her body still humming from the earlier kiss. Across from her, Ethan was impossibly composed, one hand resting on his knee, the other lazily swirling a glass of whiskey that had been waiting in the car. "So," she finally broke the silence, tilting her head. "Do you bring all your enemies back to your place, or am I just special?" Ethan smirked. "I only bring back the ones who interest me." Sophia scoffed, leaning back against the leather seat. "Lucky me." She wanted to sound sarcastic, but the way he watched her, studied her, like she was a puzzle he was still figuring out. It made her feel far too exposed. So she turned to the window, letting the city lights distract her. Yet, even as she tried to ignore him, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was leading her into something she couldn't control. And she wasn't sure if she wanted to stop it. The elevator ride to Ethan's penthouse was silent, but the weight of their proximity was deafening. When the doors slid open, Sophia stepped into a space that was the definition of wealth and control. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the twinkling skyline of Paris, the Eiffel Tower standing proud in the distance. The interior was sleek, modern, cold, much like the man who owned it. No photographs, no signs of life. Just a fortress in the sky, built to keep the world out. Ethan walked to the bar, pouring 2 glasses of scotch before handing one to her. "I assume you don't back down from a drink, Lancaster?" Sophia took the glass, her fingers brushing his for just a second too long. "I don't back down from anything, Blackwood." Ethan smirked. "Good." And just like that, they drank. One glass, then another, until the night felt lighter, but heavier all at once. They moved to the sofa near the window, their glasses refilled more times than either of them bothered to count. The conversation at first was playful, taunting, sharp, filled with amusement and veiled challenges. But as the alcohol settled, the words became heavier. The masks they both wore started to crack. Sophia swirled the amber liquid in her glass, her gaze distant. "You know, I used to believe people like you had everything." Ethan leaned back, watching her. "And now?" She exhaled softly, her voice quieter now. "Now I know power doesn't mean happiness." A muscle in Ethan's jaw ticked. He took a slow sip of his drink before speaking. "Happiness is a distraction." His voice was calm, but something in his tone told her he wasn't just saying it to sound untouchable. Sophia studied him for a moment. "That's not true. You just don't want to admit that you lost it a long time ago." Ethan let out a quiet chuckle, but there was no amusement in it. "What about you, Lancaster? What did you lose?" She hesitated, because for once she didn't want to play the game, didn't want to keep the walls up. So she told the truth. "Trust." Ethan's expression shifted slightly. "Someone took that from you?" Sophia looked down at her glass, swirling the liquid inside. "Someone made me believe I could have it." The words felt too raw, too vulnerable. But when she finally met Ethan's gaze, she didn't see mockery or arrogance. She saw understanding, and for some reason that made it even more dangerous. The scotch burned in their veins. The weight of unspoken pain and buried emotions pressed down on them. And then, neither of them was sure who moved first. 1 second, they were sitting across from each other, locked in an intense, silent stare. The next, Ethan's glass was set down with a quiet clink, and he was leaning in. Sophia's breath hitched, but she didn't stop him, didn't move away, didn't want to. And when his lips finally met hers, everything else ceased to exist. The kiss was not hesitant. It was fierce, demanding, like a storm that had been waiting to break. Ethan pulled her onto his lap, his hands tracing the curve of her back, his grip firm, possessive. Sophia didn't push him away. Instead, she welcomed the fire, tangling her fingers into his hair, arching into him as his lips moved against hers. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew this was a mistake. But for once, she didn't care, didn't want to think, didn't want to remember that they were supposed to be enemies. Right now, the only thing that mattered was the heat of his touch, the way he made her forget every rule she had ever followed. They barely made it to the bedroom. Clothes were discarded carelessly, their bodies pressed together, their breathing ragged. And as Ethan whispered her name against her skin, as he claimed her in a way that no one ever had before, Sophia realized something terrifying. This wasn't just lust. This was something far more dangerous. Because for the first time in her life, she had given in, and she had no idea if she would be able to walk away. Sophia woke up to the blinding morning sun streaming through the sheer curtains of her hotel suite. Her head throbbed, a dull ache from the whiskey, but that was the least of her concerns. Because the real problem was the steady warmth beside her. Ethan Blackwood. His arm was draped over her waist, his grip firm, even in sleep, as if he wasn't willing to let her go. A stark contrast to the cold, controlled businessman she had met the night before. Panic surged through her. What the hell did I do? Memories came rushing back. The rooftop bar, the tension, the kiss that had spiraled into something far more dangerous. A mistake? A miscalculation. Sophia jerked away from him, but the sudden movement caused Ethan to stir. His blue eyes fluttered open, groggy yet sharp with awareness. Instead of pulling away, he let his fingers lazily trace over her bare waist before finally releasing her. "You're up early," he murmured, his voice husky from sleep. Sophia swallowed hard, gripping the sheets around her. This was a mistake. Ethan propped himself up on one elbow, watching her with an unreadable expression. Then, in a maddeningly calm voice, he said, If I remember correctly, you didn't seem to think so last night. Heat rushed to her face. Damn him. She gritted her teeth. I was drunk. Ethan arched an eyebrow, his smirk deepening. Strange. I distinctly recall you pulling me closer. Sophia ignored the way her pulse quickened. She needed to get out of there. Now. She quickly gathered her things, slipping out of the room without another glance back. But as soon as she stepped out of the penthouse, flashes exploded around her. The paparazzi were already waiting. Microphones were thrust in her direction, voices overlapping in a chaotic frenzy. Sophia Lancaster, did you and Ethan Blackwood spend the night together? When did your relationship start? Is this a secret affair between the elite? Sophia's stomach twisted. This was not how things were supposed to go. Behind her, she sensed movement. Ethan was stepping out of the hotel, his presence as commanding as ever. Unlike her, he looked completely composed, his suit impeccable, his face unreadable. They could have ignored the reporters. Walked away. That would have been the logical move, but Ethan Blackwood was never one to let the media control the narrative. Instead, he did the unthinkable. He stopped, turned to face the flashing cameras, and in a calm, measured voice he declared, I don't want to hide it anymore. Yes, Sophia and I are together. We'll be getting engaged next week. For a brief, stunned moment, silence hung in the air. Then chaos erupted. Sophia's brain short-circuited. What the hell did he just say? She spun to face him, eyes blazing. What did you just say? Ethan smiled, a slow, calculated smirk. Half amusement, half something far more dangerous. Before she could unleash her fury, he leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. I'm simply turning the situation to my advantage, my dear fiancé. Sophia barely had time to process his words before he wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. His grip was firm, possessive, giving the cameras exactly what they wanted. Panic surged in her chest as she tried to break free, but Ethan held her steady, lowering his voice just enough for only her to hear. Stay calm, darling. We wouldn't want to cause a bigger scene, would we? Her teeth clenched. She knew he was right. If she reacted aggressively, it would only fuel the media frenzy. Begrudgingly, she let him guide her toward the waiting car. The door shut behind them, sealing them inside a bubble of silence. But the tension inside the car was suffocating. Sophia turned to Ethan, her glare sharp enough to cut. What the hell are you doing, Blackwood? Ethan leaned back against the seat, unbothered, his piercing blue eyes glinting with amusement. Helping you out of a mess. Sophia let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. Helping me, or throwing me into an even bigger disaster? Ethan shrugged, his signature smirk playing at his lips. A little of both. Sophia's fingers curled into fists. She had faced powerful, manipulative men before. But Ethan Blackwood was different. He wasn't just dangerous. He had just made her the next challenge he intended to conquer. By the time Sophia got back to her apartment, the damage had already been done. Her phone was blowing up with notifications, calls from her editor, messages from colleagues, even old friends she hadn't spoken to in years. She opened her news feed, and her stomach dropped. Every major media outlet had picked up the story. Notorious CEO Ethan Blackwood engaged to investigative journalist Sophia Lancaster. Enemies turned lovers, the power couple no one saw coming. A secret love affair or a high-stakes deal. Sophia muttered a curse under her breath, slamming her phone onto the coffee table. Before she could even begin to figure out how to handle this disaster, her phone vibrated again. She glanced at the screen. Ethan Blackwood. For a moment, she considered ignoring him, but she knew she couldn't. With a deep breath, she answered. We need to talk, his voice came through, calm and unaffected. As if this wasn't the PR catastrophe of the century. Seated across from Ethan in his sleek, luxurious office, Sophia could feel the weight of his gaze. He wasn't the least bit rattled by the chaos he had unleashed. If anything, he looked perfectly at ease, as if this had all been part of his grand plan. Sophia crossed her arms. "I don't have time for this mess, Blackwood. You owe me an explanation." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her, his fingers interlocked, his blue eyes cool and unreadable. Then, in that calm, infuriatingly calculated voice, he said, "We have two options." Sophia tensed. "Oh, this should be good." "One," Ethan continued, "you publicly deny everything, but that will only encourage the press to dig deeper and twist the narrative against us." Sophia hated to admit it, but he was right. If she denied the rumors now, the media would only become more relentless, desperate to uncover the real truth. "And option two?" she asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. Ethan reached into his desk and slid a thick document toward her. "We get married for 6 months, then go our separate ways." Sophia blinked, utterly stunned. "You're joking." Without missing a beat, Ethan said, "This is a marriage contract. 6 months, no strings attached." Sophia stared at the contract in front of her. She knew this was insane. But the real question was, did she have a better alternative? Sophia Lancaster had done many reckless things in her career. She had exposed corrupt politicians, infiltrated high-profile events under fake identities, and gone head-to-head with some of the most powerful figures in the corporate world. But agreeing to marry Ethan Blackwood? This was by far the most insane decision of her life. Yet here she was, standing in front of his estate in Monaco, her suitcase in hand. The mansion was a masterpiece of modern architecture, sleek glass panels, and steel structures overlooking the breathtaking Côte d'Azur. From the outside, it exuded wealth, power, perfection. But as Sophia stepped inside, she realized something. It was cold, not in temperature, but in presence. The house was grand, luxurious, but it felt like a 5-star hotel rather than a home. There were no personal touches, no warmth, just a place of calculated precision, much like its owner. Behind her, Ethan loosened his tie, shrugging off his suit jacket with practiced ease. "If you'd like to redecorate, be my guest," he said casually. Sophia turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "I doubt I'll be here long enough to care." Ethan smirked, but there was something unreadable in his gaze as he stepped closer. From the beginning, they set clear boundaries. They would live under the same roof, but their personal lives would remain separate. Ethan would take the master bedroom, and Sophia would have a room on the opposite side of the house. No unnecessary interactions, no crossing of personal lines, a perfect arrangement to avoid any unwanted intimacy. Or so they thought. Because living under the same roof meant inevitable encounters. The first unintentional run-in happened the next morning. Sophia, dressed in an oversized t-shirt and loose pajama pants, walked into the kitchen intending to grab a quick cup of coffee. But to her surprise, Ethan was already there. Seated at the breakfast table, his posture effortlessly composed, a steaming cup of black coffee in one hand and the Financial Times in the other. He didn't even glance up as he greeted her. "Good morning." Sophia crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. "I thought CEOs like you were out the door before sunrise." Ethan smirked slightly, finally looking up. "I have a late meeting today, and I don't skip breakfast." Sophia's gaze flickered toward the table. Toast, eggs, a fresh cup of coffee. "You made this yourself?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. Ethan set the newspaper down, giving her a pointed look. "I don't like other people making my breakfast." Sophia said nothing. Instead, she poured herself a cup of coffee and settled into the chair across from him. "So, I guess we're just going to live like two strangers sharing a house?" she mused, taking a slow sip. Ethan rested his elbow on the table, his gaze assessing. Not exactly. Oh? Sophia tilted her head. The press is still watching closely, he explained. To maintain appearances, we should at least pretend to be a normal married couple in public. Sophia let out a dry chuckle. A marriage based entirely on performance. How romantic. Ethan didn't reply. He simply watched her with that same unreadable expression. No matter how much they tried to keep their distance, the house was too big, yet too small at the same time. One evening, fresh from a shower, Sophia stepped out of her room, wrapped in a delicate silk robe, her damp hair cascading over her shoulders. And just her luck, she walked straight into Ethan. He had just emerged from his study, the top buttons of his dress shirt undone, a glass of red wine in hand. Sophia barely had a second to register the way his eyes flickered over her, lingering just a fraction too long on the loosely tied robe. Narrowing her eyes, she crossed her arms. How long do you plan on staring? Ethan, completely unfazed, arched an eyebrow. If you don't want to be stared at, you could wear something less distracting. Sophia scoffed. This house belongs to me as much as it does to you, Blackwood. I can wear whatever I damn well please. Ethan smirked, stepping closer, too close. His voice was low, teasing, yet dangerously unreadable. By all means, continue. I won't object. With that, he walked past her. But even after he was gone, she could still feel the weight of his gaze lingering on her skin. Sophia let out a slow breath. These 6 months were going to be much harder than she expected. To maintain the illusion of a perfect marriage, Ethan and Sophia frequently attended high-profile events together. At one particular gala for financial elites, Sophia stunned in a breathtaking crimson gown that hugged her figure flawlessly. She exuded elegance, confidence, and an undeniable allure. And Ethan, ever the embodiment of perfection in a sharp black suit. But tonight, something felt different. His eyes lingered on her more than usual. Throughout the evening, he kept her close, a firm hand resting on her waist, his touch possessive every time someone approached them. Sophia frowned slightly, leaning in to whisper, "You don't have to be this convincing." Ethan lowered his head, his warm breath brushing against her ear. "I'm simply playing the devoted husband role, darling, just like you." Sophia stiffened. She hated the way he said darling, mocking, teasing, but what she hated more was that something inside her stirred at his touch. This was supposed to be just a contract, a scripted performance, a temporary arrangement. But with each passing day, the line between pretend and real blurred. Sophia reminded herself not to get caught up in Ethan's game. The problem was, she wasn't entirely sure he was just acting anymore. Sophia Lancaster never let herself get distracted. She had built her career by staying focused, ruthless, and emotionally detached from the people she investigated. But with Ethan Blackwood, it was different. He was supposed to be her target, the man she needed to expose. Yet every time she got close to him, she felt herself losing control. The event was hosted at one of the most exclusive venues in Paris, an extravagant ballroom filled with the world's most powerful figures. As Sophia and Ethan arrived, all eyes were on them. They were the perfect power couple, the tech billionaire and the fearless journalist. Sophia wore a crimson gown, sleek and form-fitting, the deep red silk clinging to her every curve. She knew the dress was a statement, a way to show the world that she was just as formidable as the man beside her. Ethan, as always, was the picture of effortless control, dressed in a tailored black suit, his blue eyes sharp and unreadable. But something felt different tonight. Ethan's presence was closer, his touch lingering a second too long. Every time someone approached, his hand found her waist, his fingers grazing her skin through the delicate fabric of her dress. Sophia frowned slightly, leaning in to whisper, You don't have to be this convincing." Ethan tilted his head, his breath brushing against her ear. "I'm simply playing the devoted husband role, darling, just like you." Sophia stiffened. She hated the way he said darling, mocking, teasing. But what she hated more was the way her pulse quickened at his touch. Despite the public illusion, Sophia never forgot her real purpose. Her marriage to Ethan wasn't just an arrangement, it was an opportunity to uncover the truth about him. For weeks she had been watching him, studying his movements, analyzing his company's financial records. But something didn't add up. Everything was too clean, too perfect. No hidden offshore accounts. No suspicious transactions. No evidence of market manipulation. Sophia narrowed her eyes as she scrolled through the data on her laptop. No one in power was this untouchable. She refused to believe it. Ethan Blackwood had a secret, and she was going to find it. Late at night, when Ethan was out attending meetings, Sophia made her move. His home office was a fortress, secured by biometric locks, surveillance cameras, and encryption systems meant to keep people like her out. But Sophia wasn't just anyone. She had spent years infiltrating high-profile targets, and tonight was no different. After bypassing the security system, she stepped inside. The room was as cold and calculated as its owner. Dark mahogany shelves lined the walls, filled with books on global markets and technology. His desk was pristine, organized down to the smallest detail, except for the single file resting in the center. Sophia's fingers tightened around the folder as she flipped it open, and what she found made her blood run cold. A list of classified transactions. Blackwood Innovations had been involved in a series of private investments with global tech firms. At first glance, everything looked legal. But as Sophia examined the patterns, she realized these investments weren't just financial strategies. They were power plays. Ethan wasn't just expanding his empire. He was controlling the market itself. Sophia's breath quickened. This was the kind of information that could destroy him, and she had it right in her hands. "What exactly are you looking for, darling?" Sophia froze. Her fingers clenched around the papers as she spun around. Ethan stood in the doorway, his posture relaxed, but his piercing blue eyes held something dangerous. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't angry. He was amused, and that was far more terrifying. Sophia squared her shoulders, forcing herself to stay calm. "No one is as perfect as you pretend to be," she said coolly. "I was just trying to see what you're hiding." Ethan's lips curled into a slow, knowing smirk. Then he moved. Each step was slow, deliberate, predatory. Sophia instinctively stepped back, but she had nowhere to go, her spine pressing against the bookshelf behind her. Ethan stopped inches away, his gaze locked onto hers. The air grew thick with tension. "And did you find anything?" he murmured, his voice dark and teasing. Sophia swallowed hard. She hadn't found proof of corruption, only that Ethan was far more powerful and strategic than she had ever imagined. "I don't know yet," she admitted. Ethan tilted his head, his smirk deepening. Then, in a voice impossibly low, he said, "The only thing I've ever hidden, Sophia, is how I really feel about you." Her breath caught. What? Her mind screamed at her not to believe him, that this was a manipulation, another one of his calculated moves. But his eyes, for the first time, they weren't cold. They weren't mocking or unreadable. They were serious. And that terrified her more than anything. Before she could process what was happening, Ethan leaned in closer. So close she could feel the heat of him, the scent of whiskey and control. For a split second, she thought he might kiss her. And what scared her the most? She wasn't sure if she wanted to stop him. Her pulse pounded wildly, her body betraying her mind. But before Ethan could touch her, she ducked under his arm and escaped. Ethan chuckled under his breath as he watched her retreat, shaking his head, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Stubborn little thing," he mused. Meanwhile, Sophia slammed her bedroom door shut, pressing her back against it. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her heartbeat out of control. She squeezed her eyes shut. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop hearing his words. "The only thing I've ever hidden is how I really feel about you." Sophia hated herself for the way her stomach twisted at the thought. Because the truth was, she felt something too. And that was far more dangerous than any secret Ethan Blackwood could be hiding. The morning after Sophia's near-disastrous encounter with Ethan, she woke up feeling off. Maybe it was the sleepless night. Maybe it was the way her chest tightened every time she replayed his words in her mind. Or maybe, just maybe, she was starting to lose control over something she had never meant to feel. But whatever doubts she had about Ethan Blackwood, whatever emotions she was desperately trying to bury, none of it mattered, because within hours her world was about to explode. Sophia's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first she ignored it. She was used to chaos, used to media storms. But when the number flashing on her screen was her editor's, a sinking feeling formed in her gut. She answered, "What's going on?" A beat of silence. Then, "Have you seen the news?" Sophia frowned. "No, why?" "Turn on the TV, now?" Dread settled heavy in her stomach as she reached for the remote. The screen flickered to life. And there it was. Breaking news: Blackwood Innovations implicated in multi-billion-dollar scandal. Her breath hitched. The news anchor's voice filled the room. Sources claim that Ethan Blackwood's company has been manipulating the tech market for years, orchestrating private investments to eliminate competition. The leaked financial documents show a clear pattern of market interference. Sophia's stomach twisted. No, this wasn't right. Ethan had secrets, yes, but he wasn't reckless. He would never allow his company to be exposed like this. Then, and in a shocking revelation, the leak allegedly came from investigative journalist Sophia Lancaster. The world stopped. Sophia's vision blurred, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. What? She grabbed the remote, increasing the volume. According to sources, Lancaster had been investigating Blackwood Innovations for months. Many now suspect she secretly compiled this information and provided it to authorities, betraying the very man she recently married. Betraying. The word echoed in her mind like a gunshot. Sophia shot up from the couch, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. She knew exactly what this meant. It meant she was being framed. It meant Ethan would believe she was the one who sold him out. And worst of all, it meant she was about to lose him forever. Sophia didn't hesitate. She stormed out of her room, heading straight for Ethan's office. Her heart pounded violently, her breath short and uneven. This wasn't just about the scandal. This was about him. She flung the door open without knocking. Ethan was standing by the massive glass window overlooking the Monaco skyline. He didn't turn around. He didn't even flinch. But in his hand, a crumpled newspaper told her everything she needed to know. He had seen it. He had read the headlines. And now he was silent. Sophia's chest rose and fell rapidly. "You read it, didn't you?" Her voice was sharp, laced with urgency. Still, he didn't face her. Instead, he spoke quietly, his voice controlled, but colder than she had ever heard before. "What do you want me to believe, Sophia?" A knife twisted in her chest. She steeled herself, stepping closer. "You know me," she said, voice cracking slightly. "I would never do this. I only report the truth. I don't fabricate stories." Finally, Ethan turned, and when he did, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. His blue eyes were unreadable, but she could see it. The doubt, the hesitation, not anger, but uncertainty. And that hurt more than anything else. Ethan studied her, his jaw tight. Then, after a long silence, he let out a low, humorless chuckle. "Would never?" He took a step toward her. "You mean like how you would never go through my files?" Sophia froze. A lump formed in her throat. He knew. He had known all along. She had spent months doubting him, trying to uncover secrets that didn't exist. And now? Now the tables had turned. Now he was doubting her. "Ethan!" "Don't." His voice was quiet, but the weight of it crushed her. "If you want to tell me you didn't do this, fine. But don't stand there and act like you've always trusted me." Sophia felt her heart break, piece by piece. Because he was right. She had spent so long trying to prove that Ethan Blackwood was a fraud. But now that he thought she had betrayed him, she had no proof to clear her own name. A heavy, unbearable silence stretched between them. Then Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was quiet, final. "I need time." 4 words, no accusations, no reassurances, just a quiet retreat. Then, before she could say another word, he walked past her, out the door, and out of her life. Sophia didn't even remember how she got back to her room, didn't remember sitting down, didn't remember staring at her phone screen. The article was still there, the accusations, the lies. Her name was being dragged through the mud, her reputation shattered, but none of it hurt as much as Ethan's cold stare. Not the flashing cameras, not the harsh comments online, not the betrayal the world believed she had committed. Just him, the way he had looked at her, like she was a stranger, like she was a mistake. Sophia clenched her fists. She refused to let it end like this. She wouldn't just sit here and watch Ethan walk away, watch everything fall apart. She had to find the truth. Because if she didn't, she would lose him forever. Sophia Lancaster was not the kind of woman who sat back and let the world destroy her. She had spent years uncovering the truth, exposing criminals, dismantling powerful figures who thought they were untouchable. Now she was the one under attack. Now the world believed she was the traitor. And Ethan Blackwood, the one man she never wanted to lose, believed it too. But she wasn't going to let this be the end, because she knew the truth, and she was going to prove it. For the next several nights, Sophia barely slept. She combed through documents, traced every leaked report, and cross-referenced them with internal Blackwood Innovations data. She analyzed the stock market movements, the shifts in media coverage, and the exact timing of the anonymous leaks that had sparked the scandal. And then she found it, a single discrepancy buried beneath layers of fabricated evidence. This scandal wasn't random. It was orchestrated. Every leaked document had been planted. Every press article had been strategically timed. Someone wanted to take Ethan Blackwood down, not just in the media, but financially. By driving his company's stock prices into the ground, they had created an opening for a hostile takeover. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the name buried in the evidence, a name that sent an icy chill down her spine. Liam Carter. Sophia stared at the name, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk. Liam Carter had been her friend. They had grown up together. He had been one of the few people she had trusted completely. And now he was the one who had set her up. Liam had used her name to leak false reports. He had positioned himself as an ally, playing the role of a concerned friend while secretly feeding fabricated evidence to the press. And he had done it for one reason only: to destroy Ethan Blackwood. Sophia felt something twist painfully in her chest. It had been so perfectly executed. He had known that Ethan would doubt her, that he would hesitate to trust. And he had used that hesitation against them both. Sophia clenched her fists. She had everything she needed. She could expose the truth. but a single thought nagged at her. Would Ethan even believe her? Sophia didn't wait. She stormed into Ethan's office, her heart hammering as she shoved a thick file onto his desk. He looked up, his expression unreadable, cold, controlled. But she didn't care. "You need to see this," she said, voice steady. Ethan didn't even glance at the file. Instead, his blue eyes locked onto hers, searching. "Why are you here, Sophia?" She exhaled sharply. "Because you need to know the truth." Ethan finally leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk. But he still didn't look at the file. Instead, he asked something she wasn't prepared for. "Why do you need to prove that to me?" Sophia's breath caught. She wasn't expecting that. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, before she could stop herself, she said the only thing that mattered. "Because I don't want to lose you." Ethan froze. His breath hitched, his jaw tightening, as if her words had hit deeper than he expected. "I don't want to lose you." The words echoed like a thunderstorm between them. It shattered everything, every wall, every doubt. And finally, Sophia saw it. The hesitation in his eyes was gone, and in its place was something raw, unspoken, devastating. He already knew the truth. Sophia's fingers tightened into fists. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispered. Ethan exhaled, his gaze dark. "I knew it wasn't you." Shock rippled through her. "Then why didn't you say anything?" His lips curled into the faintest, most devastating smile. "Because I needed to hear you say it." Sophia's chest tightened. She had spent so much time doubting him. She had spent so much time trying to uncover secrets that didn't exist. And all along, he had only been waiting for her to realize what he had already known, that this wasn't about evidence. It wasn't about proving her innocence. It was about whether she was willing to fight for him, for them, for something real. Sophia didn't hesitate. She moved toward him, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time, she wasn't running away. Ethan stood perfectly still, as if waiting. And when she finally reached him, she lifted a hand to his face, brushing her fingers against his jaw. His breath hitched. His eyes flickered with something undeniable. And then she kissed him, not out of impulse, not out of confusion, but because she wanted to, because she had finally found her answer. Ethan stilled for a fraction of a second. Then he responded. His hands cradled her face, his lips claiming hers with undeniable hunger. This wasn't just a kiss. It was everything. The pain, the longing, the waiting, and the love that had been buried for far too long. When they finally pulled away, their breaths mingled in the quiet space between them. No more hesitation, no more uncertainty, just two hearts that had finally found each other. Sophia smiled softly, resting her forehead against his. "We have a lot to fix," she murmured. Ethan smirked, his hands still holding her close. "Then we'd better get started." And this time, there was no doubt left between them. The truth was out. The scandal had been exposed for what it really was, a calculated attack orchestrated by Ethan's enemies. With Sophia's evidence, Liam Carter's betrayal was brought to light. The media turned against him, and Blackwood Innovations stock rebounded almost overnight. But none of that mattered, because for the first time in months, Ethan Blackwood and Sophia Lancaster had nothing left to hide. The 6-month agreement between them was over. It should have been the end. That morning, Sophia walked into Ethan's study, expecting to close this chapter of their lives. She was ready for it, or at least she told herself she was. But when she stepped inside, her breath caught, because there, on the desk, was a single sheet of paper, the contract termination form. It was already signed. All she had to do was add her name. Her fingers brushed against the document, and for the first time, Doubt crept into her chest. She had waited for this moment. She had known this day would come. She was supposed to be happy. Then why? Why did it feel like her heart was breaking? Before she could take the paper, a warm hand covered hers. She turned. Ethan was standing close, too close, his expression unreadable. Then, right in front of her, he lifted the paper and tore it apart. Sophia's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let the shredded pieces fall between them, like white petals scattering on the floor. Then, he leaned in, his voice low, deep, and filled with certainty. "This contract is over." Sophia's heart pounded. Ethan watched her, his blue eyes holding something raw, something real. And then he said the words that changed everything. "Because from now on, you're my wife, not by contract, but by heart." Sophia stood frozen. If this had been months ago, she might have turned away, might have run from her own feelings. But not this time. This time. She looked up at him, her green eyes glowing with an emotion she no longer wanted to hide. "Is that so?" she murmured. Ethan smirked, not the cold, unreadable one from their past, but something softer, warmer. "Sure." "So, will you finally be my wife in every sense of the word?" Sophia laughed softly. Then, she did something she had never done before. She closed the distance first. Rising onto her toes, she wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him, not as part of a contract, not as an act of pretense, but as a woman who had finally chosen him. Ethan stilled for only a second. Then he pulled her in, deepening the kiss, claiming her completely. There was no hesitation, no games, no power struggles. Just them, two people who had spent too long fighting something inevitable. Two people who had finally stopped running from what was real. When they finally pulled away, Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his hand still cradling her face. "You drive me insane, Sophia Lancaster." She smiled. "Good. Someone needs to keep you on your toes, Blackwood." He let out a soft chuckle, and for the first time, she saw it. Ethan Blackwood, the man who had once been cold, distant, and untouchable, was finally home. The world had always speculated about them. The press had once called them a contract couple, a PR stunt, a power move. Now, the headlines told a different story. Blackwood and Lancaster, a love story no one saw coming. Once enemies, now lovers, the unbreakable bond between a billionaire and a journalist. From a contract to something real, how they proved the world wrong. Sophia had once thought this was all temporary, that one day she would walk away from Ethan Blackwood. But as she stood beside him, watching the waves crash against the Monaco shoreline, feeling his fingers intertwined with hers, she knew one thing for certain. This was never just a contract. This was always meant to be something more. Ethan turned to her, watching her in that way he always did, like she was the only thing that mattered. "Regrets?" he asked. Sophia smirked. "Not a damn one." He pulled her close, his lips hovering just above hers. "Good," he murmured. Then he kissed her, and this time, there were no misunderstandings, no fears, no walls between them, only two hearts that had finally found their way home.